house. And soon word gets out, and people are talking about it locally, and reporters are chasing Sean around, trying to get him to admit that he knows something about Natalie's death. And all this ends up being too much for Sean. So he starts posting on his Facebook about wanting to unalive himself. And people see this, and they immediately report it to the police. And the police, they go into a wellness check. They show up to where he is, and he is not doing so well. So they take him to a treatment center. And there, he starts freaking out and yelling, and I guess he assaults a police officer. And of course, they got to arrest him for that. Here's his mugshot. And once Sean gets arrested, the internet, some of Natalie's family members, they all start rejoicing. Everyone's celebrating, and everyone's happy. Natalie's killer just got arrested. Until suddenly, police let Sean go again. And not only that, they clear his name. So I guess Sean was right. He's a weird guy, but he didn't kill Natalie. Now, at this point in the story, police have looked at everything they can, but they have no more leads. But then, about a month goes by, and they finally get a hold of Natalie's phone records, because it takes a while to get phone records. Once those records come in, police find over 100 messages to and from a number they don't recognize. That number belongs to this guy, who we'll call Pizza Man. So police find Pizza Man and they bring him in for questioning, and there, Pizza Man says, yeah, he met Natalie once, but he really doesn't know this time. So then Pizza Man starts bullshitting, and he changes his story a bunch of times, but then, after a lot of questioning, he finally admits that, yeah, he does know this story. And also, he was with her when she died. And then he goes on to tell them the version of what innocently happened. Here's what Pizza Man claimed ultimately happened. After making that Facebook post about Sean, Natalie wakes up in really bad things. She's depressed, she's having issues with her boyfriend, she's got this guy stalking her, she's also got some drug issues she's been dealing with. She's a whole mess. So she's thinking about unaliving herself, but she can't actually bring herself to do it. And that is when she gets a crazy idea. She'll put an ad on Craigslist looking for a hitman. That hitman can come unalive her. So she goes to her computer and she types up this ad and she posts it. And like, who the hell would possibly reply to this ad? Well, minutes later, someone actually does reply. Pizza Man. And he tells her, yeah, he can do it. He says he's a hitman. In fact, not only is he a hitman, he says he's an experienced hitman. But in reality, he's not. He's just a guy who works at doctor. So Pizza Man and Natalie, they start texting back and forth a ton. And Natalie tells him she's serious about this and she wants it to be over with quick. And she asks him if he has a pew-pew to do it with. And Pizza Man's like, no. And she's like, all good, I have one. And she goes and gets her boyfriend's Glock. Later that day, Pizza Man drives over to pick her up. She gets there and she gets in his car. They drive around for a few hours. They're looking for the perfect spot to do this in. Eventually, they find that perfect spot. It's near the woods on this dairy farm. So they stop at the farm, and Natalie hands Pizza Man the Glock. And Pizza Man is like, are you sure you want to do this? And Natalie's like, don't try and talk me out of it. So then Pizza Man raises up the pew-pew, points it at her, and he closes his eyes, and he pulls the trigger, shooting her in the head, just like she asked him to. And then he grabs her purse, and he throws the purse and the Glock in the trunk of his car, and he drives away. That is the story Pizza Man told police, that she wanted to unalive herself, and all he did was help her do it. And no one knows how true this story is. Regardless, it's still legally murder. So they arrest Pizza Man, there's his mugshot, he takes a plea deal, and he's sentenced to 48 years in prison. Shout out to Craigslist and Domino.
You are my high. Yeah.
So this guy, his name's Gary. And Gary just got away with murder. And I bet you're going to be glad he did. The story actually starts with Gary's son, this kid. His name's Jody. He's 10. And Jody's an active kid. He really likes sports. And one day, he gets enrolled in karate. And he really likes karate. And he's actually pretty good at it. And he also really likes his karate instructor. This guy, Doucette. He's 24. Now, Doucette is a friendly guy. But
I'm just a chill guy.
is his only source.
I'm just a take a forward trip. Fly to
Now,
next summer.
Gary feels bad because he's such a nice guy and he seems to be good with kids. So Gary decides to let Doucette eat dinner with the family sometime. He lets him borrow their shower when he needs it. And so Doucette, who's over there all the time, ends up becoming a family friend. So now he's always teaching Jody karate, he's driving him home from practice, he's taking him out to see movies, and they have a lot of fun. And this relationship goes on for a while. But here's where the story gets dark. Turns out, Doucette is low-key of the world. And once the family starts trusting him, he starts testing boundaries with Jody, touching him when they're alone, seeing how far. And this is a common thing that these videos do. They'll often test boundaries little by little to see how far they can get, to see if anyone calls them out. And they'll test boundaries with the parents too. They'll take the kid out for a few hours to see how long it takes for the parents to get worried, stuff like that. And this is exactly what Doucette does. And after a few months of testing these boundaries with Jody and his parents, he straight up starts essaying Jody. And he's always hanging around the family, so he gets to do it frequently, nearly every day, anytime he can get Jody alone. And the whole
The auto and diesel programs at Universal Technical Institute for Creative Industry Input for Manufacturing.
time, Doucette is pretending to be Jody's friend. He's always taking Jody to a movie theater and on trips to karate tournaments and stuff. And Jody, with his 10-year-old brain, he doesn't know what to make of all this. He doesn't like the touching stuff. He thinks it's weird. But he likes hanging out with Doucette because he's older than him, but he's not nearly as old as his parents. But he is still an older guy, so he's still got that cool factor going. So young Jody doesn't know anything, and he doesn't tell anyone about the essay or about any of the inappropriate stuff going on. And all this goes on for about a year. But then it really goes wrong. One morning, Doucette comes over to Jody's house, and Jody's mom is there. We'll just call her Mom. And Doucette asks Mom if he can borrow their car, because he needs to run an errand. And Mom's like, sure, Doucette, you can use the car. And then he asks if Jody can ride along with him. And Mom's like, sure, have fun. So they leave, and several hours pass. And Mom notices Doucette hasn't come back. She starts panicking. Where the hell are they? Did something happen to them? And so she calls police. Meanwhile, Doucette has got Jody in the car, and they're driving west because Doucette is officially kidnapping him. And they make a few stops, but then they end up at Doucette's uncle's house where they ditch them. And then he and Jody, they get on a bus, and they go from Louisiana all the way to Los Angeles. Now, Jody's 11 at this point, so naturally he doesn't fully comprehend the gravity of everything that's going on. I mean, he still thinks Doucette is his cool, older friend and that they're somehow out on some kind of adventure. And so while they're in Los Angeles, Doucette walks them around downtown and they see a TV show being filmed and he gets to see the Hollywood sign. Then that same day, they get on another bus and they travel from Los Angeles down over to Anaheim. And they stay in a motel. And then the next day, Doucette takes Jody to Disneyland. And he's 11, so I'm sure he has a good time. Now, at this point, Jody has been missing for 9 whole days. And Gary and Mom, they're back home and they are going insane. And there's a nationwide manhunt looking for these two, and the FBI is now involved, and no one really knows if they're ever going to see Jody. Until Doucette makes a big mistake. Because that night at the motel, he decides to allow Jody to make a call back home to his mom. So Jody calls his mom, and they have a quick talk. But what Doucette doesn't know, and what Mom doesn't even know at this point, is that the FBI had tapped her phone. Because they were hoping that at some point Doucette would call, and they were right. So they trace the call, and pretty quickly, boom, police bust through the motel door, and bam, they arrest Doucette. Here's his mugshot. And Jody ultimately gets sent back home to Baton Rouge to be with his parents. But here's where the story gets really crazy. They put Doucette in jail, and 2 weeks later, they extradite him from California all the way back to Baton Rouge. That same day, Gary goes to a local restaurant to get lunch, and even though he just got his son back, he's still upset. I mean, police told him all the terrible things that Doucette did to Jody. So Gary is just sickened by all this. He can't get over it. It's eating him alive. Which I assume would be normal for any parent. I mean, your son gets kidnapped and violated. I imagine you'd be losing your mind too. Thinking of all the crazy shit, wanting to punch holes in the wall. I mean, you'd be mad, I would. So anyway, Gary's at this restaurant, and a local news reporter recognizes him. He's like, hey, Gary, do you know what time Doucette's extradition is? And of course, Gary doesn't know. The police never told him. But then that reporter finds out the information. And for some reason, he goes back to Gary and tells him, hey, it turns out they're going to be bringing Doucette to Baton Rouge Airport around 9 o'clock tonight. And that moment is when Gary just snaps. And he decides he's going to get revenge. And he goes and he gets his gear and heads to the air. Because he is not going to let this slide. He's about to get it. And so he's there at the airport. He's wearing a disguise, baseball hat and sunglasses. And there are news camera crews and police all over the place. And everyone is there waiting for officers to arrive and a quick walk-through set in the area. And Gary, he gets on a payphone and he's got it back to everyone so that no one will see him and recognize him. And that is when the police escort enters. And they're walking through with Doucette. And he's right. And right as they walk past Gary's here, he quickly grabs his pew-pew and he points it at Doucette's head and bang! Now, obviously, I can't show you the video. It's way too gruesome and I don't want my video. But local news camera crews captured the whole thing. And so, bam, Gary is immediately arrested and Doucette is rushed to the hospital and there he actually dies the next day. But here's the complicated part. Jody is actually mad at Gary over all this because in his 11-year-old mind, he saw Doucette as his good friend, the guy who showed him around LA and took him to Disneyland. And from his perspective, his dad just suddenly unalived his friend. And Jody stays mad at him for a long time. But eventually, they do mend their relationship and they make up. But anyway, Gary ends up taking a plea deal where the charges against him are dropped down to manslaughter. So, at the end of it all, he only gets community service and 5 years probation for unaliving this predator. And ultimately, he spends 0 time in prison. And here is what he looked like in real life.
$3 million in bonus money. Win 2 Fest is back. Hard Rock Bet. Download and play now for your shares.
So this guy walks into a Chuck E. Cheese play, and he just starts blasting, blam, blam, unaliving several children. And some people think this massacre inspired a whole-ass video game franchise. Let me explain. Now, the guy's name is Nathan. He's 19. And Nathan is kind of a turd. He's been in and out of trouble his whole life. Doing some armed robberies and spending time at the Juvenile Detention Center. Now he has an actual job, working at the pizza place / arcade Chuck E. Cheese, where he works as a dough master. I guess that means he makes the pizza. But then, one night, he's working a shift, and he goes to talk to his manager, because he wants to ask for more hours. So he asks the manager to give him more hours, and manager's like, nah, bro. And this makes Nathan mad, and they start arguing, and it gets heated. And pretty quickly, bam, the manager straight up fires Nathan. And Nathan, he doesn't take this firing well. He's pissed off. He feels like he was wrong, and he vows that one day, he's gonna get revenge. And so a bit of time passes, and Nathan is still salty thinking about this. He hates that manager. He tells all his friends how he hates that manager. Sometimes he even visits the Chuck E. Cheese to eat and vent to his old Chuck E. Cheese coworkers like, this place sucks, that manager sucks. And I guess his old coworkers humor him, but they don't really take him serious. And 5 months go by, and this resentment has been building up in him this whole time. How dare they fire him when all he did was ask for more hours? Now, I don't know if he's in a bad mood or just having a terrible day, but one afternoon, Nathan is playing basketball with his friends, and he decides that this is it. Today is the day. And he says it out loud to his friends. Today is the day I'm going to get revenge on that manager, and I'm going to rob that Chuck E. Cheese. So later that night, around 9 p.m., he gets a pew-pew that he had stolen from a friend's grandmother's house long before this. He gets that pew-pew and he hides it in his pocket. Then he borrows his girlfriend's car and he drives it to the Chuck E. Cheese. He goes inside, he sits at a table, he orders a ham and cheese sandwich. He's acting pretty chill. And then he goes and he plays an arcade game. The game he plays is actually Hogan's Alley, which Hogan's Alley is ironically a shooting game where you shoot targets with one of those big red arcade pew-pews. Anyway, after